What's up guys, welcome to a little bit of a bonus feature from GetPsyched this week. This week we're taking a look at some content for all the psychology students out there. We're going to look at nailing your assistant psychology interview. What's up guys, welcome to another week's episode of GetPsyched. We've got a little bit of bonus footage this week and we've got some content specifically for the psychology students out there. And like I said, this week we're taking a look at nailing your assistant psychology interview. Guys, also before we go any further, don't forget to like today's video, you can comment and I'll be sure to get back to you, and also consider subscribing to our channel. Now for many psychology students and graduates, an assistant psychology position is like the paramount position that people want to get out of university. If you're thinking about a career in psychology, if it's clinical, counselling, health, occupational, sports and exercise, whatever it is, an assistant psychology position is paramount. What's more and even more challenging is that these jobs are so competitive. So as soon as you put an application in, it's going to be tough for you to get to that interview process, no doubt. So long as you've got qualifications and experience, then you're in with a shout, no doubt. But the process of actually getting to the interview phase is difficult. We actually have a lot of content for psychology students on our blog, on our website, and we also have a playlist on our YouTube channel as well for everything to do with psychology students. So make sure to check that out because there's actually more information on that as well about your assistant psychology application and getting your first assistant psychology job. So make sure to check that content out after this. But let's say you're into that phase of the interview process as an assistant psychologist. I've got some key points for you on improving your chances of getting that job based off my own experience and the people that I know. During my time as an assistant psychologist, I use these principles in my interview process and beat off hundreds of applicants to the job. You're going to make sure to watch right to the end as well, guys, because the last point to this is the most important point that you need to get across in your interview if you want to get that assistant psychology job. So let's get to the first point. And point number one goes without saying really, but it's about getting your personality across. I say this time and time again to psychology students. One of the things that psychology students focus too much on is getting a first or getting a merit and talking to employers about their qualifications and their studies and their doctoral thesis. All of those things are important only because they get you in the door. Without that, you can't apply. Without that, you can't get an interview. So the fact that you've turned up for the interview, the fact that you've applied and been accepted, shows those people that you already have those qualifications. That's a great thing. You know, you'll get that across in your CV. You don't need to jump into the interview and talk loads about the qualifications that you did and how much work you put in and your doctoral thesis to too much of a level. Just be careful with that. What's important is that you get your personality across. Ultimately, you're going to be working with people, regardless of the sector that you work in as an assistant psychologist, you're going to be working with and for other people. You need to be likable, you need to be engaging, you need people to kind of connect with you. The only way that they're going to see that that's possible with you is if you get your personality across in that interview. So be engaging, be casual to some degree, allow yourself to kind of open up and ask questions yourself and engage with the questions that are being asked of you. Really get that personality across. For me, when I got my assistant psychology position, I was by no means the most qualified that turned up for there. I was sitting in the waiting room actually at one point, and somebody who was going for my job, it was probably about 200 people that were going for my job. The person next to me had a PhD in sleep psychology, whatever sleep psychology is, but she had a PhD in it. She was doing a thesis on sleep psychology. So she was already a doctor and she was going for this assistant psychology position. I had come straight out of uni. I had no assistant psychology experience. I had experience as a health support worker, as a support worker, as a telephone counsellor, that kind of stuff. That was it. I went into the interview and was able to get my personality across, and I honestly believe that was one of the key things that got me the job. My next point is to be prepared for the niche of the sector that you're working in, because you might get asked some really specific questions. Now, this came up for me. This was actually a big thing that I actually wasn't all that prepared for. I didn't think that this would happen. I got my job as an assistant psychologist in a brain injury unit. And what happened was I got, at the very end of the interview, I got asked to fill out a sheet about the different areas of the brain and what those areas did. Now, I was fortunate I had just come out of a neurology module from my university degree, my last module. So I remembered a little bit about the brain and the different areas and what the brain did, fortunately. But if I didn't do that, I don't know if I really would have even got the job, because I don't know if I could have filled those questions out. So for you got to think about the sector that you're going into. Some people work as assistant psychologists in brain injury units. Some go into learning disabilities. Some go into all kinds of different sectors. So thinking about the sector and thinking about the questions that are specific to that sector that you might get asked and being prepared for those questions is paramount. My next point for nailing your assistant psychology interview is showing that you really can work in a multidisciplinary team. Now, this is important because it's so overlooked. Often what happens is assistant psychology applicants go in there and think the job application is all about them, and it's not. It's about your service users, which is of course paramount, but it's also about the wider team that you're going to be working with. And you need to come ready with examples of how you work in a multidisciplinary team, or when you've worked in a multidisciplinary team, and the lessons that you've learned, and how you're enthusiastic and keen to work in multidisciplinary teams in the future. No assistant psychologist, no psychologist actually in these sectors stand alone. They work with people like occupational therapy, they work with speech and language, they work with nursing staff, they work with psychiatrists even. So you've got to show that you're able to work within that unit with different sectors, with different occupations. Really get that across that you're keen to do that and that you have experience of it. My second to last point is to talk about your experience, but tie it back to the job that you're applying for. So one of the things that we often talk about in psychology interview processes or getting jobs as an assistant psychologist or a psychologist is you need to talk about your experience. Your experience is so important when it comes to your application. It's more important than your studies. I'm getting that across again to you. I hope you're getting the message here. Your experience and the lessons you've learned from your experience are more important than your studies. But what's even more important is that you tie those experiences back to the job at hand. So for example, when I went and worked as an assistant psychologist and I got my job and it was at a brain injury unit, I had never worked in brain injury. But that didn't mean that my experience wasn't valuable to working in brain injury. So for example, I had worked with vulnerable people. I had worked in helping professions. I had worked in caring professions. I had worked in multidisciplinary team sectors. All of those experiences, all of those pieces of experience were valuable for me as an assistant psychologist going into a brain injury unit. I didn't have to have that experience of working directly in brain injury before going in. Some people did, but maybe didn't get that across enough in the interview. I was able to do that. I was able to say, this is the experience I have, and this is how it informs me and helps me do the job that hopefully you're going to hire me for. So make sure to get that across. Okay, final point here is the biggest one. And I said at the start of the video that you need to wait for this point because this is massive. It's so big that when I was an assistant psychologist working at a brain injury unit, they were hiring other assistant psychologists. So I was in a job for about 3 months and they then decided to hire another assistant psychologist. And the applicants they got were really experienced, well educated, they had the right qualifications, they even had the right experience, but the majority of them didn't get the job because they didn't talk about this. And it was why they wanted the job. Why you want this job is so important to get across. You need to let these psychologists or the people hiring you know why this stuff is important to you. Why do you want to be an assistant psychologist? Don't forget, this is a really niche industry. Also, no one goes into assistant psychology just to become an assistant psychologist for the rest of their life. They go into those positions in order to propel them to future careers. Don't be scared to talk about that because that's part of your why. That's part of the reason why you want that job. These people want to know what your future aspirations for your career is. So you're getting this assistant psychology position. What are you going to do with it in a year? Are you going to become a clinical psychologist? Are you going to go into counseling psychology? Are you going to go into human resources? What are you going to do with this experience? Why do you want to work here with us? Answering that question is priority number one, I would say, when going into an interview. And if you can nail that, if you can get it across why you want that position and why you're the person for it, you're going to get that job. So make sure to keep that point at the forefront of your mind when going for that assistant psychology interview. Okay guys, thank you so much for watching this week's episode of GetPsyched. This has been a little bit of bonus feature content this week looking at nailing your assistant psychology interview for all the psychology students out there. If you've enjoyed today's video, then make sure to hit that like button and you can comment. I'll be sure to get back to you. And if you've been enjoying GetPsyched as a whole, make sure to subscribe to us and hit that little bell next to the subscribe button and you'll get more content like this every week when we upload. Thanks so much for watching guys and hopefully catch you next week.